name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost.
Amen.
Amen. You may be seated. Well, we'll begin in Mark chapter 4 this morning, but before we revisit the gospel passage that we just read, I'll tell you a story. 9 years ago, give or take a few months, I became a father for the first time. Jonah came into the world hesitantly. It was a long labor, very intense delivery. And Jonah came out stunned and not breathing at all. And just as we were celebrating his final exit from the womb and a reprieve from a very long labor process, some unseen hand hits some unseen button, and an alarm goes off, and suddenly there's like 8 more hospital staff in the room, just materializing out of nowhere. And they crowded around his little body, and one of them with fingertips at the ready to massage his tiny little chest, and another bringing out this tiny little respirator that looks like it's made for a squirrel, for his little mouth. And it was a scary moment. Felt like it felt like probably 10 minutes, but it was probably 30 or 45 seconds. Finally, he took his first gasping breath to our relief. As I stood there in tears, I was instantly and completely consumed by love for this little person. And also so astounded by the mystery of how this tiny little figure could ever grow into a full-size person. I mean, he just seems so small. How can this be? I remember thinking. So we pick up in chapter 4 of the Gospel of Mark. Jesus is teaching the people in this rapid-fire procession of parables. Well, just as a review, what is a parable? It's been said that a parable is an earthly story with a spiritual or a heavenly meaning, which is catchy, but maybe a little too simplistic. You could say that a parable is a sort of extended analogy, or some type of a deeper illustration of a truth that's not always apparent. It's a lot of times just sitting just below the surface. It's not always crystal clear. In fact, as the gospel writer points out, as we just read at the end of that passage in Mark 4, Jesus taught the people in parables, but he explains the meaning to the disciples. He teaches them and then kind of turns as an aside or later on and gives them the full meaning. Well, that's not fair, you may say. Why didn't he tell everybody everything? As we walk through the Gospels, we're quickly able to see those who seek Jesus don't always come with the most pure intentions. There are those who seek him solely for his healing powers. They think he's this healer, this great healer, this magician that they can come to with their dangling limb or some kind of disease that's can't be cured by any other means. They come to Jesus and expect him to do something about it. There are those who really just want to destroy him. Pharisees or religious leaders who are threatened by his rogue interpretations. They perceive as rogue interpretations of the law, or just by the fact that he's so popular among the common people, and really they're not. There are those who simply just curious about his celebrity. He's famous, right? He's famous. Let's see if we can go get a picture with him. They don't really care about the spiritual truth that he's trying to convey. Their real interest is just the fact that there's a buzz building around this guy, and we should just go try to get to the front of the line so we can see him. Then there are those who are just simply looking for the next radical leader to lead a violent revolt against the Romans. So you can see the crowds that gathered at any one point were really made up of a mixture of all these different types of people. A fusion of motivation. I think Jesus taught in parables oftentimes to weed out those with ill intentions, to draw in those who truly sought after the truths of God. Who were those people? Most of the time it was the disciples. The disciples were the ones that were fully committed to following in his footsteps day after day, to following this man and living life with him, to absorb everything that came out of his mouth. They had a real affection and commitment to this man who was their rabbi and their Messiah. So in Mark chapter 4, if we picked up a little bit earlier than this, at the beginning of the chapter, we see that Jesus is actually starting to get a little claustrophobic. He's teaching and the crowds press in. It's like, when they open the doors of, the concert, everybody rushes to the front of the stage. They're pressing in, they're pushing forward, and getting a little too close. He's backing up and realizing that this is just not a sustainable situation. So what he does is he gets in a boat and he pushes out into the water a little bit. He pushes out and begins to teach the people from there, a couple of feet from the shore. They can press in all they want. He's in the boat and he's teaching. So that's where we pick up. Jesus is actually giving this sermon or these parables as he's sitting in a boat teaching the people on the shoreline. And as he teaches them in this particular passage, he focuses in on one particular illustration or theme for this set of parables. What do you think that is? As you read this portion of this passage, what do you think he's talking about most often? The seed. The seed. He's talking about the concept and the illustration, the analogy of a seed. So, at the very beginning of this passage, he speaks about a farmer going out to sow seed. And he does it rather indiscriminately. He's tossing out seed, and some of it's falling on the good ground and taking root. Some of it's falling on rocky ground, and it's just dying. Some of it's falling on the path, and the birds are coming to eat it. But the point is, he's just sowing the seed. He's doing his work. He's doing his job. He then speaks of another man who sowed the seed. At the beginning of our passage here in Mark chapter 4. And it's interesting, if I was a farmer, this would be me. The guy that just goes out and does it and is completely clueless to the whole ordeal. He has no idea how this works. He goes out, he sows seeds, and it says whether he goes to sleep, whether he stays awake, whether he sits there and watches the ground, whether he completely forgets and goes elsewhere. The seed is going to grow on its own. It's going to happen. Whether he knows it or knows how it works or not, he really has no control over whether or not this seed actually begins to grow. Can't even explain it. He surely can't control it. He just knows that if I scatter some seed, some of it, at least, is going to take root. Some of it is going to take root and a harvest will come. Following this, the final seed parable that Jesus unfolds for the people has to do with a mustard seed. Now, if you've heard this parable, which I'm sure you have preached on before, or if you've heard anybody talk about the fact that a mustard seed is very distinctive in its size, you'll know that it is tiny. The mustard seed is incredibly tiny, about 1 millimeter in diameter. And Google also told me that 1 tablespoon contains 32 calories and 2.5 grams of fat. Just in case you needed to know that. The point of the story, though, is this, that this incredibly tiny, seemingly just insignificant seed somehow grows into a full-grown plant. How can this be? How can this tiny little entity ever beat the odds and grow into something substantial? How could a persecuted band of a few disciples, following this robed teacher, this crucified rabbi, how could they ever grow and thrive, eventually becoming a flourishing church numbering in the billions? 2.2 billion at last estimation. Now, some have found it interesting that Jesus chooses this particular plant for his parable. Well, it's a tiny little seed, and I think that's his point. But in fact, the black mustard plant, which is generally thought to be the one that the specific species that Jesus is referring to, only grew in the wild. It really wasn't ever planted in the gardens of individual family. Why is that? Well, because once it was firmly rooted, it was invasive. It would spread. It was like those nandina bushes that we had out here in front of the church. They're almost impossible to uproot. They go down so deep and spread so wide that once they're there, there's not really much you can do about it. Grow and thrive in bad weather, bad soil, good soil. Once its roots had anchored themselves down, this thing isn't going anywhere. Scholar and teacher Ben Witherington notes that Jesus could have chosen a tree, a genuine tree for this parable. Small seed grows up to be something big. That mustard plant perfectly demonstrates that though the church appeared like a tiny little seed at first, it would grow into something large and firmly rooted. Some people would find invasive and annoying and try to uproot. Some would find it obnoxious. No matter what, this thing is staying. This thing is growing. This thing is thriving. Truth is that even after centuries of persecution, generations of heresy, endless decades of war and famine, and just completely inhospitable condition, the Christian church grew and anchored itself on the earth. And even though, wars of culture and secularism and violent persecution are still raging all around us, still, God is sustaining and growing His church. This thing is like a weed. It's growing. It's thriving. It's rooted. So these parables in Mark 4 show us that there is also definitely an element of faith in sowing seed. If you've ever farmed or gardened, you know that's the case. You can do everything, you can do all the right, make all of the right preparations and do all the right things. To a certain extent, there is an element of faith in it. You can't control it. You can't control the weather or the soil. You can't control these external elements. When you plant that seed, there's an element of faith there. You don't know whether it's going to root and thrive. You don't know whether it's, your seed is going to fall on good ground or sprout little saplings. You just don't know. The truth is, our job is not to analyze the pros and the cons every time we show God's love or spread the gospel message or do the work of the kingdom. That's not our job. Our job is not to go out and do extensive soil analysis before we ever are willing to cast the seed. No. We can't get caught up in trying to forecast the success or failure of our efforts. Our job is to sow. Sow the seed. Let God do the work. Whether it's the sweat and toil and resources you expend to pull off an amazing vacation Bible school for a few dozen kids. Or the efforts you put forth to reach out to someone who's hurting. Or the simple ways that you show the love of Christ through just very simple, seemingly insignificant acts of service. Seed. Seed that is ready to take root. It's ready to be cast. But we must be willing to join in the work of the kingdom. Let's pray as we close. Oh, Father, you've given us such a great and heavy responsibility. You've entrusted us with the gospel message. May we not keep it to ourselves. May we not harbor it and hold it close, but spread the love of Christ to all those around us. We pray that we would be faithful in this work. Meet us at the table this morning, Father. Pray all this in the name of the Father and of the Son, and the Holy Ghost.